Thank you, Councillor John. Right, I've got Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm somewhat disappointed by this report, and somewhat disappointed that if we were really looking for efficiencies, we probably needed to give some consideration to providing or at least consider portfolio leadership for councillors. I think that that would be a much more efficient way to deal with policy making and give councillors an opportunity to provide policy leaderships in those areas that they're passionate about. And if I look at the committees that we've just been talking about, and Councillor Filipaina is clearly passionate about arts and culture, Councillor Fletcher about parks and sports and recreation, and it would actually give those people and the others a real opportunity for leadership around policy, and it would having a council leadership from elected reps setting and bringing policy ideas, policy positions to the table where they can be considered by the other councillors, I think is much more efficient, much more a better use of both councillors' time and officials' time than the committee structure that we have. So I've got to say that I'm particularly disappointed that that is not being considered. We know that it worked well for those councillors who were on the council, the Old Manukau City Council. We know it worked well. It provided excellent leadership opportunities for councillors, brought through policy positions that were actually elected member driven, not driven by the bureaucrats of the organisation. And that's the way it should be. And that's what our community expects. Our community does expect us to provide leadership in those policy areas, not to be led by the nose by bureaucrats on a lot of occasions. There is a place, obviously, for those officials is to provide timely and neutral advice to those portfolio leaders, and I believe that we're overlooking a very good opportunity to provide better efficiency, better policy setting, and better representation of our communities through portfolio leadership. So I say that I'm disappointed with that. It hasn't been considered, and I don't know why. I know that it's been discussed. It was discussed when we had our retreat at the Cloud. At that point, it didn't seem that amongst the elected members, including yourself, Mr. Mayor, that there was much of an appetite for that kind of governance structure. But I'll keep banging on about it because I think it's a much more efficient way of spending our time and a much better opportunity for us as elected members to show leadership in those areas which we're clearly passionate about.
Good on you, Councillor Dick. Councillor George.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support. I'm obviously supporting these changes, and I probably concur with my colleague Councillor Quacks that they may not go far enough. But you know, in answer to Councillor Casey, I mean, I did raise the issue of why we were going off-site from our normal meeting place to go all around the city or around the territory for meetings at the start of the term. I did raise that issue. And I was clear that I didn't believe that we should be doing that because the cost, and Councillor Filipaina's committee goes off-site too. And I think one of the last ones, we went all the way to Papakura. So, you know, I just think that the cost of going that far, all the way to Papakura, yeah, well, No, but I just think that the cost involved of the staff having to make their way to these outlying areas, as well as the councillors, is more than I think is acceptable. And also the fact that you know, I've heard so much that we were told we were going to have Mondays and Fridays free for other activities, so that councillors could get out and meet the local people or the people out in the constituencies, so that they could be aware of what is happening and what the issues are. Well, we have not had that opportunity this term. We seem to have meetings on Mondays and Fridays with monotonous regularity. And I think that one of the problems is that we have these so many committee meetings, and there are a lot of committee meetings. The Unitary Plan Committee has a lot of work, and Councillor Philippina chairs that committee. So I say that we've got to look at ways of cutting back the amount of work that we have to, as far as committees is concerned. We have the committees of the whole, which carry out the policy work and the grunty work of council. And I think that as Councillor Quack says, the lesser committees, or the committees with less numbers, you know, you could turn them into areas where people have portfolios responsible for certain aspects of council business. And I think that council has got to be careful that we don't mix up the role of governance with the role of management. And I think that sometimes we do that at our peril, because, you know, we're talking this morning about the chief executive's role, and I think that's an area that we have to be careful we don't delve into the workings of the management of council. And so I think that I'm not going to support this change. The Mayor has put out what the proposal is, and I'm going to support the proposal and ask councillors to do the same thing. Thank you.
Councillor Penny W.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I agree with Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Quacks that this probably doesn't go far enough, but we have been asking for something. I cannot understand why, if councillors want to go out and look at an issue and have a meeting, a public meeting in an area, as Councillor Casey and Councillor Philippina have said, why can't they do it anyway in a forum-style situation? It doesn't have to take a whole reporting committee to do that. And that's my concern, as with Councillor George. I'd like to just ask, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Stephen, but will this save us? Because I know that we were talking about the cost of things.
Look, through you, Chair, any reduction in the number of meetings that we organise for governance and support, yes, there will be a saving by having less of them. So that's part of the efficiency drive, and responding to the very strong, I think the very strong message from all councillors was your diaries are overloaded with meetings, so could we do something about it and make it better?
Thank you. And, you know, it's been very interesting hearing particularly Councillor Casey, talking about committees of the whole and how we probably need to chair. But, you know, there are certain councillors who at every item will ask several questions. And as a chair of a whole of the committee, and I'd like to hear from one or two others, it is very difficult to tell those councillors not to ask questions at every item, which is probably why some of those committees go on for so long.
Okay. Councillor Arthur.
Thank you. I won't be supporting this, and I concur with Councillor Philippine and others who have said they don't support this. First thing up, the committees of the whole don't open up for the public to come and talk about a particular subject. these committees give the opportunities for those who have an interest to come and talk. And now do that with the Economic Development Committee, where anybody who has an economic issue that could be of use to us or to themselves, to come and tell us what they're doing so we know, because they don't. Now, recently we had the ED committee, and two of the members of the committee emailed me saying I should cancel it because it's going to cost money. Didn't turn up. Unfortunately, I was short by one person to get the quorum. But those that did come to that meeting, I would like you to comment on the value of hearing what the bids had to say at that meeting and what they contributed, which we could have all learned from. And so I could just comment that that's where it should be. We have a responsibility to the people who vote us to give them the opportunity to come and talk to us about things of interest to them, and in my case, it's in the ED side of things.
Yep.
I don't want to go back and raise things or make any issues, but the fact is, quite frankly, my first things I learned in business management was when you delegate responsibility, you've got to delegate the authority for it to happen as well. And it's probably one of the things we're going to have to look at in the future, how we run this council. And the other thing is, I don't see why we should be changing midstream. I think we should continue where we are right now, and when a new council come in, they can look at all this and make their plans accordingly and start afresh. And so I think you could take that all into consideration. And the other thing is, I myself wonder sometimes, what are we actually doing here? We've got 4 different sections here, there's no coordination here, we're trying to chair something, and then we're all sorts of different people doing different things within your own portfolio. So you're really in the dark, where the hell you go? Then I'm being very blunt here. So all I can say is that I don't support this. I think we should continue with it. I think we have a responsibility to the public to come in and be heard with things they want to hear. And our committees are the ones that give them that opportunity, because the committee as a whole give them 5 minutes if they're lucky. Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Wayne.
I'm very pleased that I haven't said anything so far.
Come on, Wayne.
I'd like to put another amendment on the table, and that is that the Environment, Climate Change and Natural Heritage Committee also meet on a 2-monthly basis, and I'll seek a seconder for that. Just speaking to this item,
Can do it.
you've heard from Al Filipaina, who chairs the Arts and Culture Committee. You've heard from Kathy, Community. You've heard from Arthur, Economic. Now you're hearing from me, Environment, Climate Change and Natural Heritage Committee. And I have a real concern with what we're proposing here. I don't think it's a good fit for where council is at, where the community is at, and I also don't think it's sufficient. First off, I just go back to the really big picture, and that's the Auckland plan. And I would just emphasise that the Auckland plan is a plan not just for council, it was a plan for Auckland, a plan for Auckland, and that's all of Auckland and all of its people. And the things that fell out of that plan around arts and culture and environment and community and economic and everything, they're all about what happens in Auckland. And that's not just what happens in council, it's actually us working in partnership and in engagement with the community. And what I see happening in this council is a situation where we're taking that engagement with the community and frankly, we're just reducing it. So we're becoming more inwardly focused. The consequence of what we've got here is, sure, we're going to have more workshops, but the public is not going to be at those workshops. We're going to dumb down the committees where there is an opportunity for genuine engagement. And when I say engagement, that's not just 5 minutes, that's the opportunity for some interchange and hopefully working something up so that an item that some people in the community have a concern about then gets struck up, like, say, plastic bags, which are a major environmental pollutant. Now, we had somebody speak to us on that with some compelling rationale and reasoning, and I'd like to think that it'll actually get taken up at some point, and maybe, just maybe, on the part of Auckland, we might do something about it. As far as the process is concerned here, Mr. Mayor, I don't know that you've ever been to my committee, or for that matter, any of the committees that have been under recent discussion here. I don't know that the person that wrote the report has also ever been to any of those committees. So what the logic is around reducing the frequency of those committees is, I really don't know. Certainly if the logic is around efficiency, I would suggest that these relatively small committees are very efficient and they're very low cost to run. If you look at the efficiency of the committees of the whole in the governing body meeting, but especially the committees of the whole, and you look at the number of staff members that are arrayed around the room in those committees, they are hugely expensive to run. So taking time out of these subcommittees effectively and putting it into those committees of a whole is woefully inefficient. And certainly picking up on the comment that Arthur makes around authority, responsibility, accountability, that's not efficient either. If anything, there should be more responsibility, authority and accountability around the subcommittees, and then you would have more efficiency.